This is Democracy Here. My name is Mary Malmros, and today my guest is Tahirah Amatul-Wadud, who is running to be the representative for the First Congressional District of Massachusetts. In this episode, we will be getting to know Tahirah and discussing a number of issues that illustrate the concerns of members of Franklin County continuing the political revolution. Welcome, Tahirah.
Thank you, Mary, for having me.
It's so good to have you up here in Franklin County.
It's my pleasure.
And I have to ask you a question. I've been wondering about this.
Yes.
How many miles have you put on your car since your campaign started?
I don't even know, but we were talking about counting them up because I've been using my car, my husband's car, my mother's car. But it's so much that Siri, every time I put in the address for any place in Franklin County, says this is a significant location, meaning I'm spending time and coming here quite frequently.
So that's a lot of miles in a lot of towns.
Yes.
Can you tell me some things about what you've found as you've gone around the county, as you've been to these different communities? Some things that surprised you, intrigued you? Tell me some stories.
Yes, since we've been on the campaign trail since the end of December, I've had an opportunity to meet so many people and to hear from so many families. And some of the things that have surprised me a little bit is the sense of hope that this candidacy has instilled in people and in families. People want to be heard, they want to be paid attention to, they want to be respected, and they want to have a champion. And so when I come to places where they feel like they haven't had really good federal representation that's attentive, it feels like an honor to know that someone would consider me as an option. So that's been one of the surprises, is that good emotion of being blessed and honored with such responsibility. And that is hope. And that's what we're seeing here on the campaign trail and what I hope to take with us in DC as well.
Did you find anything, any particular needs that stood out to you as you talked to people in the district?
Yes, particularly in Franklin County, where things may feel and actually be a little bit more desperate than in other aspects of the district. There's an even more need for immediate advocacy around the issues that impact the entire district. So what I tell people are the issues that I've heard on the district, in the district on the trail, are securing a Medicare for all policy, dealing with the opioid crisis, and infrastructure and building up infrastructure. And so I'm going to focus on infrastructure now because in Franklin County, I think, especially in the aspects covered in our district, that is where we are failing the most people, and it's having the most adverse impact, particularly around access to high-speed internet.
I see.
I've had teachers contact me and say, you're right. And they validate my points that our children are suffering by being cut off from the rest of the world. I think the statistic is that 34% of people in Franklin County don't have high-speed internet. And so when teachers call me who live outside of those areas and say, so my high school students, I can't give them research assignments, I can't give them homework that's internet dependent, and I can't coach them via email, I have to call them over the phone. My high school students are truncated from being able to receive the best of the educations that they deserve because of that. And that's just a gap that they may never recover from. And I consider that a crisis, and I consider it one of the most urgent civil rights and human rights issues facing families who are without.
So it's at the root of opportunity.
100%, not only economic development and prosperity, but education and quality of life I had a medical procedure recently, and my doctor said, make sure you Google this symptom. And so her fallback was to tell me to use a tool to help me understand something that I was struggling with. But what about if I lived in a community where that tool was not available?
Right, yeah.
How would that have impacted my health or ability to know whether something was wrong based on, my doctor's instruction?
Right. So you spoke about opportunity for students and the limitation that they have by not having high-speed internet. When these students graduate and want to get jobs, how does this impact the availability of jobs in the community and the viability of businesses, high-speed internet?
Yes, businesses are having a hard time existing, and businesses that are looking for places to land are ruling out our communities that don't have it. Let's face it, I won't spend the night at a hotel that doesn't offer me high-speed internet.
Because you can't function.
Because I absolutely can't function.
Right.
I'm disconnected. And I can't afford that. So why would a business settle into a place permanently, or a family settle into a place permanently that does not have it? What you choose to do with your screen time and your access is a choice, but if families don't have a choice, then their futures are marked in a way over which they have no choice. And it does impact economic prosperity and the opportunity to bring businesses here, which is also important because in our county here, of the 3 counties in the Commonwealth that are experiencing decline in population, Franklin County is one, which means that our young people are getting a taste of some freedom. Yeah, they're going off to school, they're going off to college, and they don't want to come back. And it's for a reason that is totally preventable. So yeah, it has a holistic and negative impact on our quality of life here in the county, but of course throughout the whole district.
Sure. Now, you mentioned also Medicare for All, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what that means, what you think that means to members of the district, what that would give them that they don't have now. And, if you have any, I know that your daughter had a procedure, and the question is, would that have been available to her otherwise?
Yeah.
If you could talk about that.
Well, in Massachusetts, we're very lucky because we have Romney Care. We have had Romney Care, which of course predated Obamacare, which meant that the families of Massachusetts had basically a guarantee of health insurance. And as a divorce lawyer, I'm up close and personal with families' choices around health insurance because as we reconstruct families, we're always making sure that the children are covered and that the spouses and former spouses are covered. And it's never a problem because we have laws here in the state and then federally, which make it so. Right now, as you know, the conversation in this climate is whether we could be losing the right to even as a state to sort of chart our own course around how we provide health care options here, and if the federal government takes steps that supersede what we're doing here in the Commonwealth, it could just be a mess. And for a long time we've been comfortable, but now the residents of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts realize that our health insurance is at risk. So I do support 676, which is the Medicare for All bill under Bernie Sanders, because it gives a sense of autonomy around how the policy or the idea of the policy or the application of health insurance is handled.
It's not capricious.
It's not capricious, and it serves to protect pockets of people who actually may be vulnerable for a number of reasons as to why they may not be able to get health insurance or continue health insurance. Again, when I represent families, if a spouse is working out of state and they cover the health insurance, if Connecticut does not require that ex-spouses are covered on plans, and my client lives in Massachusetts or the family lives in Massachusetts, somebody may end up without health insurance. So a Medicare for All approach solves those gaps. And of course, that type of situation disproportionately impacts women, and it disproportionately impacts families and children.
The most vulnerable.
The most vulnerable, the people who may not be able to sort of hustle a little bit into a much better job or a better job with options. And it just comes with lots of complexity that is unnecessary when you're talking about a right such as healthcare. And my daughter, who's 7 years old, she did have open heart surgery when she was a newborn. She was 9 weeks old. And because, again, we had health insurance here through my husband's nonprofit employer, and we didn't have to worry about it. But if things were different, things might be different for her. And she's a beautiful, healthy, thriving girl who loves to show people her scar, which is it was done with love. Every ounce of her care was done with love, and I would want that for every family.
What do you say to people who are eligible to be covered under mass care but unable to afford premiums? And that goes to the larger question of the nation as a whole.
There are many families who are using all of their savings to pay for even healthcare deductibles. I don't mean to present that Romney Care or Obamacare solved every problem. By no means. There are families who can't pay the deductibles, a $1,500 a month deductible or a per person deductible
or
is what I should say, or premiums. And it's expensive, and our family, in fact, was impacted by that. As it would happen, my son ends up going to the doctor for a routine visit, and he gets hit with the $800 aspect of the deductible on our plan after it changed under Obamacare. So of course it's not a perfect solution, but it is something that the American family is dealing with, and challenges that we have to recognize impact our families.
And then hopefully move beyond that with Medicare for all.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have a nice long stretch between now and the primary in September. I'm going to jump beyond the primary and kind of ask you to blue sky a little bit about what that looks like, that 2 months between early September and the election in November. Right now, there are no declared Republican candidates. There are no declared candidates of other parties. Assuming you get the nomination for the Democratic Party, what do you think? You going to cruise in November? What happens between September and November?
I'm not taking anything for granted. So we are working hard right now between now and September. And we're considering that, of course, the big fight. But our eyes and ears are open. So between now and September, we're making sure that we launch a Get Out the Vote campaign, a voter education campaign, and voter registration campaign. And between September and November, we will not take it for granted. We will continue to work really hard, and that's our plan now. If something happens where we don't end up having an opponent, then of course we can start working on what we're going to do for the district in DC, with more attention focused on that than campaigning. But for right now, we're in it for both fights, the primary and the general election. And we want to make sure that people get out for both September 4th and the November general election.
It's interesting. I was looking at some numbers today about the past elections for the seat. In the last one, in the 2016 general election, Representative Neal actually had competition in the form of an independent, Frederick Mayock, who got 18% of the vote, which was surprisingly large. And there was also a libertarian candidate who got 8.5% of the vote. That's by far the biggest challenge he has had since the district came up, was changed in 2010. The district lines are changed. Do you think that means anything?
Yeah. In addition to, do you have the numbers for the voter turnout?
Yes, 235,000 in the last election, which is down from the previous one. Yeah.
And in Springfield, a different race, but in Springfield, just to give you a flavor, and in different other cities throughout Hamden County, the voter turnout for the last municipal election was under 10%. So what does that say to me? That says to me that the people who are able and willing to get out and vote have the opportunity to impact change, but that for the people who either are presented with barriers or lack of information, that their apathy is also reflective of sort of the general picture of how things in our district are less than ideal, and that those are the people, and the people who turned out the 18% and the 6% that you had said, those are the people who are going to make the change possible. So that those numbers are quite important, and we are paying attention to them.
That's very interesting. Now, thinking about the district more generally, Massachusetts, I recently heard a statistic saying 3.5% unemployment. In the first district, it's 10.7% unemployment. And the median income, household income, is $49,000 a year versus $75,000 for the state. Why?
Why is the magic question. Out of the 9 districts in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the First Congressional District has the lowest median income. So you just cited the lowest median income in the Commonwealth by district. And it's about $55,000 for the district. There's so many things that come to mind when I talk about that, because it says to me that there are families who are making way above the median income, and they're holding the district up. But there are families who are making way below the median income, and for them, they're living hand to mouth, and life is quite hard. And I've met families on both ends of the spectrum, and they don't feel like their futures are bright in either scenario. I am offended by the lack of concern for these families and the general sense of poverty that we're seeing impacted upon us. It is unacceptable. It's simply unacceptable to have the most tenured congressional representative in the state bringing us in dead last.
But how do we solve this problem? Because looking at the district, we have urban areas like Springfield, we've got Pittsfield, and then we've got a lot of rural areas, and they seem very different. They seem like they would be at opposite ends of the spectrum. So how do we solve all those problems simultaneously? With
information. Because right now, we're living off of myths. We're hearing that, oh, well, the congressman is sending money to Springfield, and that's where money is going. But families in Springfield are living hand to mouth. The average income in Springfield is about $35,000 a year in the city and in the county in which he lives. The families that I know in Springfield are working more than one job. They have bachelor's degrees, and they're struggling. And many families, just like in Springfield, and I'm using Springfield as the point of reference for this discussion around inner city or urban life, people are piecing together their lives. So you have jobs, full-time jobs, part-time jobs, and some form of help, daycare voucher assistant, WIC, or food stamps, just to be able to survive. And that story is happening in Springfield, it's happening in Holyoke, Chicopee, it's happening here in the rural communities, in the urban communities, suburban communities, because the problems are generally the same. And we live off of misinformation and myths about really what's impacting each of us. The reality is we all have generally the same struggle, it just manifests itself differently. So the first thing we have to do is talk about the numbers, educate people on what's happening in the district to everybody, not just them or me, but us. And then we can move forward. That's how we solve it. That's how we start to solve it, is to let people see that there's a problem that needs to be addressed.
And that there's a commonality.
And that there's a commonality.
Yeah.
And that is my primary commitment and sense of urgency on the campaign trail.
I see. Have you been everywhere in the district? Is there any town that you haven't visited that you plan to visit?
My goal is to visit all 87 cities and towns by before the primary. And we just finished Democratic caucuses. We're still tallying up the numbers for either where I've been or where the team has been. But I did have an elected official come up to me the other day and say, your team has been everywhere.
It's true.
And if that's what it feels like, then that's what we're doing. We're making sure that we are listening to everyone, that we hear, that we're visible, that we're approachable, because there's no way to develop commonality unless we're out there serving as the person who's going to receive and do with that information what needs to be done.
That's great. So let's think beyond November. You are hopefully part of a blue wave. We're nominally blue now,
Yes.
but you're hopefully part of a blue wave that's going to take back the House, take back the Senate, and change the future of America. If Democrats take back the House, what are your legislative priorities?
Yes, it's exciting because I imagined that I'd come in as a freshman class of hopefully new, energetic, and
Motivated.
candidates who are coming in to put forth a people first platform. And we see what's happening even in these special elections.
Absolutely.
And how that's impacting things and
Right.
what people want and what we're going to push for. My legislative priorities would be to open up every aspect for federal funding which addresses infrastructure on the issues that I've spoken to. And there are a lot of ways that that can be done. And we're talking about making sure we advocate around the Farm Bill appropriately, which is tough because currently it's being drafted by the Republicans. We don't know where that's going to.
More agribusiness than agriculture.
Yes, and we don't know where that's going
Right.
to land. But our eyes and ears are open on that because it doesn't just impact rural communities; it impacts everybody.
The food supply.
Who eats?
Yes.
Right. Food security, food stability, food
Right.
safety,
Right.
along with all other aspects of quality of life and funding and things like that. Of course, the Medicare for All is also strong on our priority list, and criminal justice reform is also quite important. And
Sure.
the reason that I sort of hesitate in talking about it is because it's the way that we're going to deal with the opioid crisis. It's one of the important ways that we deal with the opioid crisis because we have to deal with the opioid crisis, looking at it from a social justice and human rights issue, but not just dealing with addiction in the form of how it presents through opioid use, but through crack, heroin, and cocaine. Move away from the punitive model and embrace a more compassionate and clinical model. And then we get there. And also deal with the disparities in how addiction is treated in Black and brown bodies versus how it's treated in white bodies, and develop a model that deals with it as a human issue.
Right.
And so I'm going to get behind or draft and advance legislation that reflects those priorities.
I think a lot of people will be glad to see that.
Yes.
Now I'm curious, because you were talking about criminal justice reform, have you had interactions talked with the various DAs in the district?
I have not, but on my wish list of things to do is to talk with or at least invite every elected official to have a quick chat with me, especially the ones in the district. And we have so many, and we have so many wonderful people serving our communities.
Right,
and I've
right.
started doing it, but I want to definitely complete it within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we've been hearing so much about how important DAs are
Yes.
to the whole thing, to the whole picture of
Yes.
criminal justice reform, sure, obviously, but also how communities experience, the impact of legislation.
That's
and so
right.
on. Yeah.
And I'm keeping a close eye. It's not as much of a federal issue, but just as a lawyer, I'm keeping a close eye on the bills pending here, even in the state, around criminal justice reform.
Right,
Because it's
right.
important.
Yeah, very. So now the really hard question, what if the Democrats don't win? What if we're still in the minority after November, but you got elected? Do your priorities change? Do your strategies change? Do your tactics change? Do you change as far as what committees you want to be on? What do you do? What do we do?
That scenario, of course, would be sort of a nightmare, right? Because our hopes are up
Yeah.
that things are changing and that the form of government that we want may be looking a little bit more like
more democratic, right?
A dream rather than a nightmare, more democratic. Right. If it doesn't turn out that way and I'm in office, I would assure our community that I will always be a champion, and even in dark times, which it would be. Yeah. The good thing about being a lawyer is that I learned how to fight. I learned how to use process to get what I need from my clients, and I'm really good at it. But the other thing that I've learned how to do is to find points of conciliation where necessary. And my goal and my job would be to go across the aisles and look for where we have commonality with people who may be from the other party and push. And without having the baggage of having been in office for many years, I may be able to build relationships and call on community building and legislative building that best serves the country more than I would if I had a history that maybe others didn't care for necessarily, a legislative history.
Yeah. I have one more question that I want to ask you, and take as much time as you want on this.
Okay.
You win, you're elected, whether you're in the majority or not. What are the things that you would want to take to Washington from our district that we all love so much? Tangible things, intangible things. What do you take into your office on that first day?
Oh, I love that question. So what I've been doing while we're on a campaign trail is I've been taking pictures as we enter the different towns and cities.
With the town name on the sign? Oh, yeah.
Yes. And I want to personally take pictures of each town and city, and I want to create a collage. And it's beautiful. And it starts to make me a little emotional when I think about it because it's the best of, to me, it is the best of what our district offers, is to drive through and see that. And we did it during the Democratic caucuses when it was snowing and how beautiful it was and how beautiful the mountains were. And we went up to Williams College and the mountain range. It just was just wonderful. So I would take pictures of each of the cities and towns. I would, another one of my priorities is to create a very special program for the children and the youth, the teens and high schoolers of our district, to have great opportunities for internships. And I would be creating an internship where students can come down to DC and spend part of the summer there, high school and college, and hopefully not be at any expense to their families, so that every child has an experience and not have it cost prohibitive. So hopefully I'll take children with me that are not just my own.
That is a wonderful vision. Well, I see that we're out of time, so let's conclude on that, and let's try to make that vision a reality.
Well, thank you.
This is Democracy Here. Thank you very much. And thank you, my guest, Tahirah Amatul-Wadud. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Here.